basically, this is the gist of solving this. If you have a negative 3x and a positive 3x, or let's say if you had a negative 4y and a positive 4y, the whole thing about elimination is if we technically stack these up and add these values together because they're lined up, the x's and the y's and all that's lined up right here. So we got x's lined up, we got y's lined up, we have our other value lined up. If we have a negative 3x and a positive 3x, what's going to happen if you add these two values together? Hence the word elimination. Yeah, these are going to eliminate. Negative 3x, positive 3x, add them together, they eliminate. They're gone. So that now all we have left is a positive 4y and a negative 6y. Okay, let's add those values together. We come up with a negative 2y. We are also going to add the 12 and the 18. That's going to give me 30. Okay? So you always have to be able to cancel off the x or the y to technically use elimination. Okay? You have to either be able to subtract them or add them together so that they eliminate. So negative 3x plus a positive 3x, they're gone. So now we can easily figure out what y is. What's the last thing we have to do here, Freddie? Oh. You don't know how I got from here? All I really did, I added 3x. Well, first off, I made sure that they're lined up. The x's, the y's, and then this other value. Okay, second off, I notice I have a negative 3x and a positive 3x. If I add those two values together, they eliminate. Okay, so they're gone. So that now we could easily figure out what y is going to be. So now we added 4y and the negative 6y. We added the 12 and the 18. So the next thing we'd have to do is what, somebody? It doesn't matter who. Divide both sides by negative 2. Okay. And we would get y equals negative 15. Now, remember, systems of equations. We're really looking for the x and the y. Remember, got to figure out what the solution is, where they intersect. That's what this whole thing is based on. Finding where they intersect. So we have a half of it. Okay. We need to figure out what x equals now. Now, you could use either one of those two equations at the very top. You could use either one of these equations to figure out what x is going to be. All you would have to do is plug in this negative 15 for y into y, whichever one you want to pick. Now, to me, let's just pick the first one. Okay? So I'm going to use this negative 3x, this first equation. That's what I'm doing right here. Negative 3x plus 4. Now, I do know what y equals. I know it equals negative 15, so let's plug that in. Then equals 12. Guys, notice how for the negative 15, I put parentheses around it. And anytime you insert a number or substitute in a number, put parentheses around it. Okay? Any questions so far? So we eliminate to figure out what x or y equals. Once we have that, we're going to figure out what the other value is going to be. So yes, now we need to multiply 4 times the negative 15. Okay? Our next step is right here. 4 times the negative 15. That's going to give me a negative 60. Okay? Let's just keep on solving. Negative 3x minus 60 equals 12. Remember, the whole thing is figuring out what x equals. What does x equals? You would add 60 to both sides. You wouldn't divide both sides by negative 3 or do anything like that. We first need to add 60 to both sides. Okay? Make sure you're writing this down. Okay, so we're figuring out what x is now. We got y, I just need x. Need the other half of this puzzle. Last thing, divide both sides by -3.
-24.
-24. That sounds about right. Now we know what x is, and we know what y is. So I'm gonna start working this thing out. You guys can follow along.
If both the problems don't have the same number of ones, they're not going to be elimination.
Well, we'll get to that. But for right now, yes. Got to have the same numbers. And we'll get to the opposite sign part. So just we're starting with the basics right now. So that we got a -5y, we got a positive 5y. Let's go ahead and stack them up and line them up. Well, they've already done that for us. Okay, notice my x's are lined up, my y's are lined up, and my value at the end is lined up. Okay, so let's just draw that line. Let's add these values together. Okay, like we talked about, those 5 y's, they go bye-bye. They eliminate. Okay? So they're gone. Tyler, what happens to that? What happens when we add the 2x and the 3x? Tyler. Yeah, 5x. Dakota Henson, what happens when we add the 1 and the 9? 10. Perfect. Last thing we would have to do is divide both sides by 5. And x equals 2. Or does. However you want to say it. 10 divided by 5.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, 10 divided by 5. Now, we got half of the puzzle. We got to figure out the other half. All we would have to do is plug in what we have for x into one of these top equations. Let's use the bottom one because it's positive. It's always easier, I think. Just use those positive values. Okay. So we got a 2. We're going to insert that 2 for x right here. Okay. Plus 5y equals 9. Okay. Does everybody see where I got that? That's my second equation. That's what I'm using. I'm using that second equation. All right. We got to figure out what y equals. So let's go ahead and work this out. This is going to give me 4 when you multiply that. Okay. What would I do next? -4 from both sides, absolutely. Okay, don't get confused. Don't try to divide, multiply. Don't do all that. You have to leave that y on that side by itself. Okay, so that's going to give me 5y equals 5, and we divide both sides by 5. And we get 1, or uno. We need to do this, okay? So we're going to stack these up. They're already stacked up for us. Let's line them up. We got the x's, the y's, and all that value on the other side. So instead of adding, we are going to subtract because we have to eliminate the x's. So we're going to subtract here. You have to be extremely careful when you subtract. Let me explain why. I want you to think about this. All right. So we're going to do 4x minus 4x. What does that mean? Well, that means the x's are going to cancel out. Okay, so they're gone. We got rid of those.
That's why they're x's.
Yeah. Yeah. Well done. Now, for the y's. This is where you have to be careful. Okay.
Positive 2, no, that's 3y equals negative 1y.
Right here, we have a positive 2, 2y, minus a negative 3y. Okay, so if you need to come over to the side, you can think of this as 2y minus a negative 3y.
Plus 3y.
Absolutely. Okay. You have to be very, very careful with these when you're subtracting. So much easier when you're adding because you don't have to think about the signs as much. Okay. So when you get to that 2y minus that negative 3y, Dakota Smith was absolutely right. That's going to become positive. Okay. And you're really left with 5y. That is where most of the mistakes will happen, right there. Whenever we're subtracting, and we have those negative values, it can kind of throw it off. You have to be very, very careful with it. Okay. Now the 28.
26.
Well, we got 28 minus 18.
Minus 18. 10.
10.
I have
Yep. We're subtracting here, remember, because we had to subtract to get rid of the x's.
Oh.
Yep. So the last thing we would have to do is divide both sides by 5. And we get y equals 2. Okay? So that makes sense. Those can be very, very tricky. You have to be careful with them. Yeah. Now we know y. Now we need to figure out x. Okay? Remember, we can use either one of these equations. Looks like it'd be pretty simple if we use the first equation. All right? So let's figure out what x equals. So I'm going to write down that first equation. And I'm going to substitute for y. I'm going to substitute our value of 2.
so positive 2 times 6 is 4, so 4x plus 4 equals 28.
Okay? Now, we're going to solve from here. That's going to give me 2 times 2 is going to give me 4. Make sure you're writing this down. Okay?
Minus 4. That's 24.
Now we need a minus 4 from both sides.
4x equals 24.
And lastly, we'd have to divide both sides by 4.
6.
So now we know what x and y equals. That's the solution.